Welcome, all you unabashed seekers of possibilities, all 7 of you, to episode 3 of Any Questions with Reverend Dan Sire. That's me. And I promised, holding true to the title of this channel, Any Questions, that we would begin each episode by selecting arbitrarily, possibly, one question from the previous week. And we received a question, only one question, but lucky for us, it's a good question, and that is how we will begin. With Jane, as she writes, you speak of a connection with Jesus that can transform our lives. In what ways has your life been transformed because of this connection? Damn good question, Jane, because after all, who cares anything about this Jesus business if it doesn't make your life better? If it doesn't change your life for the positive, why bother? Oh yeah, I get to go to heaven when I die. Yeah, whatever. If it doesn't make a difference now, here and now, in the quality of your life, why bother? So, has my faith in God, my faith in the creative power of love and life in the universe through Jesus Christ made a difference? Yeah, I think so. And I'll just use one example. During the course of my life, I have had a tendency to be sometimes a little too anxious, bordering on even cowardly, too tentative, too timid. And as a result, I have not been totally engaged in my life and have missed out on a lot of opportunities. So I think my walk of faith over the years, my journey of faith, my process of transformation, and not as a cop-out, but as a reality, it is a process. It is a journey. I'm certainly not there yet, but I think it has made a difference. After all, when I really got serious about my faith at age 52, I completely changed my life, went to seminary, became a pastor. What other things? I fly an experimental amateur-built airplane. Not necessarily for the faint of heart or timid. And here I am at age 72, starting a YouTube channel such it is, rather than living in Florida, playing bridge and going to dinner at 4:30. Not that there's anything wrong with that. So I think my journey of faith has helped me at least begin to throw back the security blanket of my life and to begin to explore possibilities to a greater depth, which, coincidentally enough, is a great segue, thank you, Jane, into today's message. And today's message is from Matthew 5, a continuation of last week, and this Sunday is the 6th Sunday after Epiphany. It's Matthew 5, verses 21 through 37. I'm going to read my abridged version of it because I think it's a little bit too long. And I get bored. I get bored with myself after a while. So I'm going to pare this down just to a few basic verses from Matthew chapter 5. Jesus says, you have heard that it was said to those of ancient times, you shall not murder. And whoever murders shall be liable to judgment. But I say to you that if you are angry with a brother or sister, you will be liable to judgment. And if you insult a brother or sister, you will be liable to the council. And if you say, you fool, you will be liable to the hell of fire. He continues, you have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. So, on the surface, it sounds as if Jesus is demanding perfection from us. After all, even if you're angry with someone, then you are guilty of murder. And if you look at another person with lust, you have committed adultery. Therefore, everyone, with the possible exception of some cloistered saint, is a murderer. And everyone, well, I can't speak for everyone, but at least most males over the age of puberty are adulterers. So, is Jesus saying that we have to live perfect lives in order to be in connection with the universe? I don't think so. Here's what I think Jesus is saying. He's saying that it is about time for us, it is about time for you to begin to look at your life and your faith in a new way. You have heard that it was said, but I say to you. And what could looking at your life, pardon me, what could looking at your life in a new way mean? One example. You have heard it said that you are right and they are wrong. Or is it they are right and you are wrong? I don't know. I get confused. But Jesus says the statistical probability of that dichotomy being the case that one side is always right and the other side always wrong, the statistical probability of that, Jesus says, is probably pretty low. Most likely, he continues, the truth probably lies somewhere in between. Not always, but most likely the truth lies somewhere in between. So, maybe the answer to our seemingly increasing societal contentiousness lies with you adopting a new way of being and doing. Yes, you. You have heard that it was said, but I say to you. Okay, another example. What might this mean, looking at things in a new way? What might this mean for your faith? Well, you have heard it said that the ancient stories of your faith can only be understood through the confines and constrictions of an ancient theology, such as the Christian creed that was developed by a committee, the Council of Nicaea, 1,700 years ago. And you have also heard it said that apparently our understanding of humanity, of life, the universe, and God hasn't changed over the course of the last 1,700 years. But Jesus says, yes, the stories are still meaningful and imbued with spirit and wisdom that are very possibly more relevant today than they ever have been. But, Jesus continues, maybe a committee decision of 1,700 years ago is not the best way to understand those ancient stories. For example, I, as an ordained pastor, am bound by the promises of my ordination that when I join with the congregation in our denomination of espousing our faith in the words of the Apostles' Creed, I have to say I believe in the Virgin Mary. I mean, is Mary really a virgin? Okay, of the four gospel accounts of the lives of Jesus, or the life of Jesus, rather, only two, Matthew and Luke, have birth stories. And by the way, those two birth stories are different to the extent that they both cannot be historically accurate. Matthew and Luke, check it out, read them. However, they both do claim that Mary is a virgin through a prophecy which they quote from Isaiah chapter 7:14. Matthew writes, all this took place to fulfill what had been spoken by the Lord through the prophet. Look, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son. Again, quoting Isaiah 7:14. Yet, biblical scholars almost unanimously agree that the Hebrew translation is not virgin, but rather young woman. And they also agree that the birth of the child from this young woman was meant as a sign for King Ahaz of Israel hundreds of years before Jesus was born. So the argument could be made that the writer of the Gospel of Matthew took some liberties with the ancient Hebrew texts in order to make the point that he wanted to make. Not unlike a lot of folks do to this very day. Now, please know that I am definitely not dismissing the importance of the ancient stories of the Bible. I believe that they still remain meaningful, they still remain significant, and can be life-changing. But must we continue to try to understand these stories through an ancient lens, as we have been doing for the last 1,700 years? And after all, how is that working for you? I mean, how is that working for you? There's an article. What did I do with it? There it is. There's an article that was written a few years ago, actually in September of 2019, by a professor at Luther Seminary in St. Paul and ELCA Seminary, talking about the possible statistical future of my denomination, the ELCA, Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. And according to his statistics, here's one of the things that he wrote. According to projections from the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America's Office of Research and Evaluation, the whole denomination will have fewer than 16,000 in worship, that's nationwide, on an average Sunday by 2041. That's right, he continues. According to current trends, the church will basically cease to exist within the next generation. So again, I have to ask, how's that working for you? In this story from Matthew, and go back and read the whole thing if you want, chapter 5, 21 through 37. In the story from Matthew, I do not think that Jesus is commanding us to live perfect lives. Rather, I believe that Jesus is commanding us to take a look at our lives and our faith in a new way. And I think there are consequences for failing to do so. Consequences like continuing down the path of contentious chaos in our relationships with one another. And continuing down the path of fading significance in our relationship with God. The other day I saw a New Yorker cartoon. And there was a reporter dressed in a suit, microphone in hand, out in a field, surrounded by a scene from War of the Worlds. You know, the book from H.G. Wells and the radio play by Orson Welles and the movie starring Tom Cruise. So behind this reporter, there are these Martian spaceships on the spindly legs, blasting things here and there, and people running hither and yon. And amidst this scene of chaos, the reporter is saying, same old, back to you, Jim. Well, I don't think that's what we want, is it? I think we can do better for ourselves and for our world. I think we can do better for ourselves and for our faith. So maybe, just maybe, it might behoove us to pay attention to Jesus when he says, you have heard that it was said, but I say to you. Amen. Any questions? See you next week.